They say getting stranded in the snow is dangerous, but no one warns you about what might be watching, waiting, or what could leave something in your car just to prove it was there. Because sometimes the most terrifying part isn't the crash, it's realizing you were never alone to begin with. Welcome to Miss Nightmare, the place where ordinary nights turn into lifelong trauma, where strangers don't always stay strangers, and where some encounters refuse to stay buried in the dark. Tonight's story is real disturbing and will make you think twice before trusting silence or the woods. For clarity, I should mention that I have a hearing disability and hard of hearing. I understand that there are things in life I may never fully grasp, but I still think back on this experience, wondering what might have happened and what I could have done differently. This took place about a year ago. The holiday season had just ended, and I was finally settling back into my normal routine after traveling and spending time with family and friends. I live in a small suburb neighborhood in southern Quebec, right along the edge of a forest. It's a quiet area where most neighbors know each other, which I honestly prefer. It gives the place a warm, familiar feeling. During the winter month, I like to take my dog, Monty, for walks in the nearby forest. He's a Rottweiler Husky mix. Perfect for me since I enjoy running from time to time. The forest has several trails, none of them particularly different, even for people without hiking experience. That day, it was sometime in the afternoon. I had just finished a late lunch and decided to burn off the calories by taking Monty for a walk. As usual, he completely lost his mind with excitement when we turned the corner towards the forest entrance. For February, it was fairly cold. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, covering the trails in what looked like a nearly untouched white canvas. I let Monty off his leash so he could run freely. I noticed a few yellow patches and some boot prints in the snow, which told me other people had already walked their dogs earlier in the day. Most locals prefer to come out before noon since the sun sets around 4 p.m., so I didn't expect to run into anyone that late. About 30 minutes of walking, we reached the fork in the trail. I noticed that one path hadn't been walked on yet. Feeling a bit adventurous, I decided to take it. I knew these trails well and had a solid mental map of the area, so I wasn't worried about getting lost. The path opened up into a clearing, which was perfect. I wanted to try out the binoculars I'd received for Christmas and look for native birds. As I scanned the area, something strange caught my eye near the tree line in the distance. When I focused the binoculars, I saw a blue tarp and what appeared to be a makeshift shelter. I was curious, but it was getting darker, and I decided it was best to head home. Monty and I turned back. As usual, he ran ahead. Something about his behavior felt different. He seemed unusually alert, stopping often to sniff the ground more intensely than ever seen before. When I looked down, my stomach dropped. There was a set of footprints in the snow, much larger than my own. Confused, I even turned my boots over to compare them. They didn't match. There was no other forks along the trail. Whoever made these prints would have had to pass me at some point. I assumed they must have gone by while I was distracted with my binoculars. At the time, that felt like the most logical explanation, so I tried not to dwell on it. By then, it was much darker, though I could still see my surroundings. Suddenly, Monty stopped and began barking furiously, directly behind me. I turned around. That's when I saw him. A man, probably around 6'4", stood less than a meter away from me. He was wearing a charcoal color snow pants and a white jacket. He didn't move towards me. He stood there, hands buried in his coat pockets. I didn't realize him from the neighborhood, so I assumed he was a hiker or someone from out of the town. His lips were moving, like he was saying something, but I couldn't understand him. The light was too poor to read his lips, and I couldn't tell whether he was speaking English or French, the two most common languages in Quebec. In the moment, I felt incredibly stupid for not bringing my phone with me. So I tried to communicate to him that I was hard of hearing and that it was getting late. Not long after, I made it back home around 4:30 p.m. By then, it was completely dark outside. I went through my usual nighttime routine and didn't think much about the encounter, at least not at first. But later that night, something happened that still shakes me to this day. I woke up to Monty licking my hand, something he usually does in the morning to wake me up. Half asleep, I reached for my phone to check the time. It was 3 a.m. That's when I noticed a message from my neighbor asking if everything was okay. At first, I was confused. The message had been sent just minutes earlier and said Monty had been barking nonstop, almost like he was possessed. I looked up from my phone and I realized Monty wasn't in my room anymore. I rushed downstairs and found him barking hysterically at the patio door. My vision was still blurry as I approached, struggling to make out anything outside. Then the motion sensor light turned on. My heart dropped. The man from the forest was standing in my backyard. I didn't hesitate. I stepped away from the door and texted 911. I don't think I ever typed faster in my life. I ran back upstairs with Monty and grabbed the machete I keep under my bed. I'm a shorter woman with a background in martial arts, but I know better than anyone that the best fight is the one you avoid. I locked myself in my room, guarding Monty and myself while waiting for the police. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. I sat across from the bedroom door with Monty pressed against my side. It wasn't long before he suddenly jumped up, began barking violently at the door. My hands were slick with sweat as I saw a shadow slide beneath it. The movement against the nightlight made it seem like the man was seconds away from breaking in. Those were the longest minutes of my life. I kept waiting for the door handle to turn or for the door to break in, but it never happened. When the police arrived, I explained everything while they searched the property. The patio glass had been completely smashed. Other than that, nothing was taken, and the house was mostly untouched. They found the gate at the back of my yard, wide open, the one that leads directly in the forest. They believe that's where the man escaped. I told them about the makeshift shelter I've seen in the woods that day. I stayed with a family friend for a few days while the patio door was being repaired. I never received any follow-up from the police. Since that night, I've avoided the forest entirely, sticking only to roads when walking my dog, and trying not to think about what really happened. My name is Amber. I'm a 16-year-old girl living in Illinois with my younger sister, Kate, who's 15. My dad works for a deforestation company about 30 minutes from our house. December 5th started like any other morning. My sister and I were getting ready to go to the movies. We decided to see a fairly new horror movie, Terrifier 3, which had some Christmas-themed elements. We knew it was rated 18+, but no one seemed to care. Besides, we looked older than we were. We made it in the theater without any trouble. About halfway through the movie, just as the tension was building, my phone buzzed, loud enough for half the theater to hear. The moment was completely ruined as people turned around to glare at me. Embarrassed, my sister and I rushed out of the theater, and I ended up tripping on the way out, which only made things worse. Once we were outside, I checked my phone. It was my dad. Before I could call him back, another message came through. It read something like this. Hey, could you bring me some lunch? The small cafe in the woods is closed today. I looked over at Kate. She looked just as confused as I was. But neither of us questioned the message. It seems normal enough. We went home, packed some food for our dad, and then drove my car towards the woods. I'd always loved that area and had never felt uncomfortable there. It was wide and quiet. The scenery was beautiful, a hill that sloped down to the lake, perfect for fishing or taking photos. After parking, Kate and I got out and walked along the path through the trees. I pulled out my phone to call my dad, but he didn't answer. Confused, I glanced at Kate. Why wouldn't he pick up when he had just called us at the theater? I decided to text him instead, telling him we were in the woods with his lunch. A moment later, the three dots appeared on my screen. He replied, asking us to walk down the small hill and wait for him by the lake. We did exactly that. Because it was winter, the sun was already settling. The sky glowed with deep orange light spilling over the hill and across the lake. I was lost in the view when Kate suddenly pointed ahead. Down by the water, a man dressed in black was sitting on the small deck. His back turned towards us. We assumed it was our dad. We walked closer and stopped a few steps behind him. I called out his name. He didn't move. Kate grew visibly uneasy, and her tension made the moment feel wrong, almost unreal. Slowly, I reached out and pulled back the hood he was wearing. It wasn't our dad. Kate and I screamed as the man turned around, waving my dad's phone in the air like a trophy. He was smiling, wide and excited like he was enjoying our fear. I shouted, demanding to know why he had our dad's phone. He didn't answer. Instead, he lounged forward and grabbed Kate's arm. As she screamed, I managed to yank her free and we ran. I never felt adrenaline like that before. We ran faster than I thought either of us could ever. Behind us, heavy footsteps slammed against the ground. Getting closer, I didn't dare to look back. We reached the car. I threw the door shut and locked it just as the man reached my window. He bent down, disappearing from my view, and I slammed the car into reverse, speeding away towards home. When we got there, both of our parents were already inside. We burst through the door, gasping for air, and told them everything. My dad was furious. He explained that his phone had been stolen earlier while he was working, and when he realized it was missing, he came straight home. The man must have taken the phone and used it to message us. My dad called the police and filed a report. Using the phone's IMEI number, they tracked it down and it was still sitting on the deck by the lake. The phone was returned and the officer said there wasn't much else they could do. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. 6 hours later, around 1 a.m., I received a message from an unknown number. I like that your house is lit only by your bedroom TV. My body went cold. I paused the TV and listened. I could hear rustling outside my window. My bedroom was on the second floor. Holding my breath, I slowly peeked through the blinds. There he was. The man stood outside, smiling, a gun pointed directly at my window. I screamed and pulled back just as the glass exploded inward. Spraying across my room, my parents rushed in, followed by Kate. I screamed for them to get down and told them the man had a gun. When my dad looked outside, the man was gone. Then another loud bang echoed through the house, more glass shattering, this time from the kitchen downstairs. We ran back into the bedroom and locked the door as Kate called 911. My mom held us while we cried, shaking in fear. Through it all, one thought kept repeating in my head. How did he know where we lived? Minutes later, the police arrived and searched the house, but no one was there. After Kate and I explained everything again, one of the officers suggested checking the car. That's when they found it, a small air tag, on my tire. That explained everything, how the man knew where we lived, and why he had crouched down just before I sped out of the woods. The police told us they would patrol the area and do everything they could to find him. Months passed, and he never was caught. Thankfully, he never came back either, and I hope it stays that way. Me, Kate, and our parents are still traumatized by what happened. But more than anything, I blame myself. As an older sister, I should have been more alert. I should have questioned why he wouldn't answer calls and only reply through text messages. All I know now is this: I'll be more careful. I'll never go to secluded places again, especially when someone else's safety depends on me. It was 2021. If I had to describe that day in one word, it would be hectic. Work was a nightmare. This was the peak of COVID, so I was working from home. I was supposed to meet my extended family upstate, but I ended up stuck in a nearly 3-hour Zoom meeting that ran an hour and a half longer than planned. By the time I logged off, everyone else had already arrived at my parents' house. That didn't even include the 2-hour drive it would take me to get there. Before leaving, I filled 2 large cups of coffee in my kitchen. God knew I was going to need them. The moment I opened my front door, I realized this drive was going to be worse than I expected. The snow and wind had picked up quite a bit since earlier that evening. The streets were barely plowed, at least 2 feet of snow had already piled up, and the forecast said it would continue like this for most of the night. I crawled along residential roads at under 25 miles per hour. To make matters worse, my car at the time was old, beat-up Hyundai. Definitely not built for the extreme weather conditions. It didn't even have anti-lock brakes. I've always been a fast driver though, and once I reached the highway, I pushed my speed up to 70 miles per hour, far faster than I should have been going at this condition. I finally arrived at my parents' house around 9 p.m. They had already started dinner, but thankfully hadn't gone too far. After a few drinks and some gift exchanges, I completely lost track of time. I was so caught up reconnecting with relatives I hadn't seen in a while that I almost forgot I still had to drive home until I noticed most of my family starting to leave. By the time I got back into my car, it was past midnight. Another foot of snow had fallen. I was slightly buzzed, but I convinced myself I was sober enough to drive. Not that I condone drinking and driving. I was just exhausted and desperate to get home. As I headed toward the highway, I noticed how empty the roads were. That's when I made a serious mistake. I sped up to 40 miles per hour on a long stretch of road. As I approached the curve, I suddenly felt the car lose control. I tried not to panic. This wasn't the first time I'd skidded in the snow. I steered into the skid and downshifted, but the car didn't slow down. As the curve came closer and closer, panic set in. The car slid straight off the road and slammed into a tree. The airbag exploded in my face. For a moment, I just sat there, stunned by the impact. I wasn't badly hurt, but my car was destroyed. The hood was buried deep in a snowbank wrapped around a tree. There was no chance of getting back into the road. The first thing I did was call roadside assistance. They told me a truck was on the way, but because of a storm, it could take up to 40 minutes. I was stranded on a road surrounded by forests with no houses in sight for miles. So I called my parents. My dad said he'd get in his car and drive out to wait with me. After we hung up, I sat alone in the silence, listening to the wind scream through the trees. That's when I heard something else. Footsteps. Clear, unmistakable footsteps crunching through the snow. I couldn't tell exactly where they were coming from, but it felt distant, somewhere beyond the trees. I opened the driver's side door and stepped out. Peering over the roof of my car, the footsteps had stopped. Instead, I heard something else. It's hard to describe it, but it sounded wet like a slow, slurping noise. I looked towards where I thought the sound was coming from and noticed movement near the tree line. It was pitch black, but I was almost certain I was looking at a person. I called out, "Hello?" The sound stopped instantly. No one answered. I stood there awkwardly for a few seconds, but nothing else happened. No movement, no response. That was enough for me. I got back into my car and locked the doors. Less than a minute later, I heard footsteps in the snow again. Then something hit the passenger side window hard, like a rock had been thrown. I couldn't see anything else because every window was covered in the snow. Once again, I opened the driver's side door and stepped out. That's when I noticed it. Boot prints everywhere. They circled my car and then led away from the passenger side, disappearing into the woods. My stomach dropped. Then I saw something else. Dark spots scattered across the snow. Blood. I opened my door, reached into the glove compartment, and pulled out my 9mm. Holding it tightly in my right hand, I followed the prints into the trees. At that moment, I was certain someone or something had been out there with me. As I followed the trail, the drops of blood became larger. Whatever had been bleeding wasn't hurt lightly. Then I saw it, a dark shape lying in the snow just beyond the tree. I couldn't tell what it was, and I prayed it wasn't a person. I turned on my phone's flashlight. It wasn't a person, it was a deer, dead. Its body looked like it had been torn apart by something large. Its stomach was ripped open, and worse than that, the deer had been completely decapitated. I scanned the area with my flashlight, but the head was nowhere to be seen. That was it. I turned around and headed back towards my car. When I opened the driver's side door, I nearly threw up. Lying on the seat was a severe head of a deer, placed carefully, as if it were staring straight at me. I didn't think, I ran. I made it a few minutes down the road before I saw headlights approaching. I ran towards the car, waving my arms and shouting like a madman, still holding my gun. Thankfully, it was my dad. He slammed on the brakes and demanded to know what the hell I was doing. I jumped into the passenger seat and told him everything. He didn't believe me, not at first, but I felt safer with him there, so we drove back to my car together. The footprints were still visible around it, but the deer's head was gone. All that remained was a large blood stain on the driver's seat. That's when my dad started to believe me. The deer's body was gone too. Only drag marks in the snow showed where it had been. Not long after, the tow truck finally arrived and took my car away. My dad asked if I wanted to call the police, but I didn't have the energy. I was exhausted physically and mentally. I just wanted to sleep. I figured calling the police wouldn't accomplish much anyway, so that's my story. I don't know who or what was in the woods that night. Maybe they just wanted to scare me, or maybe they had something far worse planned.